Section 2 of 3 Supernatural Stories by Wilhelmina FitzClarence. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Bruges Ghost. This story was written down for me by the seer herself, and I repeat it verbatim, as she wrote it. Number 20 is one of the oldest houses in the ancient and beautiful town of Bruges. The building consists of the basement, the ground floor, and 2 sets of apartments above, which we call flats, which are generally occupied by English families. At the time of which I am speaking, an English lady and her 2 daughters lived on the first floor, while my mother and my 2 sisters and I were on the second. One night I went to bed as usual, taking with me my small dog, which was always my bedfellow. I had been reading, and just as I turned round to blow out my candle, preparatory to settling myself to sleep, my eye was caught by the appearance of an extraordinary and alarming figure, which stood motionless at the foot of the bed, watching me intently. I was very much frightened, and started into a sitting posture to gaze at the intruder. I said the figure was motionless, but that is scarcely true, for the eyes, which had the vilest expression I ever saw, moved ceaselessly, and followed every motion I made, although the head and body were stationary. The figure was a curious one, and the garment so strange that I could not make out whether the apparition were that of a woman or of a very young man. The hair was jet black, the blackest I ever saw, worn in a kind of fringe low down on the forehead. Above each ear was a bunch of swarthy curls. The eyebrows were tremendously thick and bushy, and shining below them were the small, beady, glittering eyes, the most sinister in expression, which never left my face. The nose and mouth were small and pinched, and the complexion deadly pale. It was altogether a villainous face, and even now I shudder at the horrid memory of those eyes, fixed unswervingly on me, and on my every movement. The apparition's garment, too, was singular. Round the head was wound a sort of hood, caught under the chin, and falling thence straight down, like an enveloping toga, but I could only see as far as the waist, for my bed was one of the foreign wooden ones, with a carved footboard. It takes long to describe the apparition and its peculiarities, but I took it in very quickly, and for a moment wondered whether someone might not be playing me a trick. So when the figure disappeared, which it did suddenly, I, being wide awake, and uncertain as to whether I were frightened or angry, jumped out of bed and rummaged about, behind curtains, under tables, etc., but I found nothing, no one. I was obliged now to turn my attention to my poor little dog, for it seemed painfully distressed, cowering in the bedclothes and whining, and straining its neck to look at the spot where the figure had stood. If I had required any proof of the truth of my unpleasant experience, the dog's agony of terror would have supplied it. I tried to comfort the poor little beast, then, catching it up in my arms, I hurried with it into my sister's room. I sat there for a few minutes, and after relating the adventure, deemed it wiser to return to the haunted apartment, but the dog refused to go back. He trembled in every limb, and I, fearful lest the poor little beast should have a fit, left him with one of my sisters, the other kindly returning with me to my uncanny room. Strange to say, we both fell asleep, and had a quiet night, but from that moment I never could get the dog to enter that room. It would cry, whine, and struggle, if ever I tried to make it accompany me there to bed, so I had to give it up, and leave him downstairs. The next day I had to go to my dressmaker, who had lived at Bruges almost all her life, and was well known in the town. After fitting and trying on, she casually asked my present address, and upon my giving it she seemed surprised, and said, "Mademoiselle has changed her residence?" I answered we had been only a few days in our present apartments, but her manner was so strange that, prompted by curiosity, I inquired, "Did she ask the questions for any especial reason?" She answered, "Yes," as she had heard that since the death of the landlord's son, who, she added, was "jeune homme très méchant," no one had stayed in the house much, as it was reported to be haunted, especially the bedroom in which he had slept, and died. "What did he die of?" I asked. "Oh, from consumption, so they said, and from the effects of the wickedest life that ever had been lived," and the dressmaker shuddered. "But why does mademoiselle ask? Has she seen him?" "I have seen something," I hesitated. "Can you describe to me what he, the young man, was like?" "Très jeune, très maigre, pâle comme la mort, les cheveux noirs, boucles dessous des oreilles, les yeux très petits, très menaçants, les sourcils noirs et épais." "That is exactly as I saw him!" I exclaimed, and a shudder went all over me. "The young man was a Catholic," the dressmaker added, "and they do say that when those who can't rest in their graves appear thus, especially to the young and innocent, it is that they want their prayers." I returned home, but on my way I visited a good priest with whom I was acquainted, and begged a mass might be said at my expense for the poor restless soul, and I pray God it may be counted to him for righteousness. As for myself, I never saw the young man's ghost again, and we soon left Bruges. Not, however, before, in my work at the hospital there, for I was qualifying for a nurse, I saw a corpse draped for burial, after the Catholic fashion, and straightway I recognized the peculiar garment worn by the apparition in the Bruges bedroom. End of The Bruges Ghost.